Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I eased out of the station yard just past midnight. Engine low and headlights slicing through the fog that hugged Pine Creek Road. My name's Deputy Samuel Brockton, and I've been running these county backroads for nearly a decade. Tonight was like any other shift, until the call came in over the scanner at 12:03 a.m., an abandoned sedan, no license plates, parked under the old railroad trestle 3 miles north of town. When I arrived, the fog was so thick it felt like wading through wet cotton. My boots crunched on loose gravel as I killed the engine and grabbed my flashlight. The car sat off the asphalt, rear bumper brushing brambles. No lights, doors locked, engine cold but still warm to the touch. I circled it slowly, flashlight beam revealing chipped gray paint and shattered glass on the driver's side window. Inside, the front seat was strewn with maps and empty water bottles. No sign of the driver. My radio crackled. "Dispatch, this is Brockton. I've got an unoccupied vehicle, possible missing person. No ID on board, requesting check of registered owner." I waited. Static. The scanner cut out. Dead silence, as if someone had yanked the power. I crouched to inspect the tire tracks, one set leading away toward the old mill road, another set fading into the underbrush. I tapped my glove against the cold metal, nerves pricking. I flipped open my flashlight's red filter and slipped inside the car. The interior smelled of damp upholstery and stale cigarettes. On the passenger seat lay a crumpled business card, L. Hayes, Pine Creek Textile Mill. That business closed 2 years ago. I snapped a photo and called it in. Hayes card found. No sign of driver. Tracks head northwest. I'm following. I stepped out, closing the door softly behind me, and struck off down the path. The mill road was little more than ruts through knee-high grass. My cruiser's spotlight faded where the trees arched overhead. Every sound, the drip of water from leaves, a branch snapping underfoot, felt amplified. My hand hovered near my holster as I moved, senses taut. About halfway down, I came upon a rusted sign, "Private property, keep out." Under it, scratched into soft wood, were letters nearly worn away, "Help." I paused. The letters were fresh, deep gouges still moist. I radioed dispatch on my handheld. Brockton to dispatch. Possible trespass. Seen help carved into sign, fresh. I'm proceeding on foot. No answer. Just silence. I drew a deep breath, fog swirling low around my legs. In the distance, I heard what sounded like a child's laughter, high-pitched, quick, then cut off. My heart thudded. I swept the flashlight beam through the trees. Nothing. I took another step and the laughter echoed again, this time from my right. I spun, breath catching. No movement, only trees swaying in a barely there breeze. My radio crackled to life, voice distant. "Brockton, you there?" I keyed the mic, voice tight. "Here." Hearing something. Laughter? I'm checking deeper. The reply never came. I pressed on until the trees gave way to a clearing. There, half buried beneath fallen leaves, was a small doll, soft vinyl, missing an eye, dressed in a pink frilly dress. I swallowed, picked it up, and saw the dress was smeared with dirt and something darker, rust or blood. I couldn't tell in the low light. Hands shaking, I put the doll in an evidence bag and felt a prickle at the back of my neck, like I was being watched. I shone the beam upward. The trestle loomed overhead. dark girders cutting through the fog like ribs. I moved closer, flashlight flickering as my battery drained. Under the trestle, graffiti spelled out another word, "Run," painted in what looked like fresh red. My pulse hammered. I whispered, "What is this place?" I turned back toward the path and spotted footprints in the soft earth. Bare footprints, small, leading toward the creek bed. Water gurgled somewhere beyond. I followed them, radio still dead, adrenaline pushing me forward. The creek was a slow trickle now, but deeper near the bank. There, the footprints ended at a flat rock smeared with the same dark substance. Kneeling, I brushed dirt away, the heel imprint of a shoe too small for any of our missing persons. Under the rock, I noticed scratches, 3 parallel lines gouged into stone, fresh and raw. A sudden crack, like a branch snapping, snapped me upright. I swept the beam behind me, nothing but silhouettes of pine trunks. The air felt colder, heavy. I keyed my mic. "Dispatch, Brockton?" I'm at the creek bed, found Dolan footprints, creek sound. No sign of person, wheels spinning. Silence answered. I cursed, jammed the mic shut, and stepped back toward the path. The fog thickened, swallowing the beam. I felt my flashlight buzz, then go dark. Darkness pressed in. I froze, listening. The laughter again, closer this time. My flashlight clicked on, weak, pale light, and there, crouched 12 feet away, a thin figure in a dirty dress stared at me. No doll face, only empty eye socket and something red glinting where the other eye should be. My voice caught. "Hey, come here." The figure tilted its head. I took a step forward, heart racing, pistol drawn. The laughter bubbled up in the air, hollow, childlike, and the figure darted off toward the trestle, slipping through girders. I chased, boots slipping on wet rocks, until I reached the supports. Under one beam lay shallow footprints vanishing into soft mud. My flashlight trembled in my hand. No more laughter, no sign of it. Just the creek's quiet burble and the trestle's silent metal bones. I radioed backup, finally got a crackled answer, and waited under the trestle until they arrived at 1:10 a.m. 2 patrol cars showed up, lights off. We searched until 2:30 a.m. No trace of anyone. No footprints leading out except the ones we'd followed in. I stayed until the first patrol van came and relieved me. As I climbed back into my cruiser, I looked back at the trestle looming in the fog, the tracks of my own boots shining in my headlights. I drove away with the doll in evidence bag, its glass eye catching light like a silent witness. My chest burned, adrenaline still high, and I knew this was only the beginning. The night had more secrets to show, and I'd be the one uncovering them. I followed the patrol van's headlights back onto Pine Creek Road, the doll's empty eye socket staring at me from the center console. My hands trembled on the wheel. Backup hadn't found anything. No prints, no sign of a person, not even recent tire tracks besides mine. We canvassed the area in a tight grid, flashlights cutting through the fog, but by 2:30 a.m. the other deputies gave up. I told them to head back. I'd stay a bit longer. They rolled out, lights fading, until only my cruiser and the silent trestle remained. At 3 a.m., I pulled off the road near the old Sinclair gas station, its pumps rusted, windows boarded. I needed coffee and a moment to shake this off. The din of the distant highway sounded wrong. Too constant, too loud for 3 a.m., and the hum felt like static in my skull. I parked under the flickering neon sign, its green Sinclair letters half dark. I popped the trunk, retrieved my thermos and the doll in its evidence bag, and leaned against the car. I took a slow sip. The coffee was cold and bitter. I spat it out, hands shaking. Something caught my eye. footprints leading around the side of the station toward the back parking lot. I frowned. The gravel was slick with dew. The prints were fresh, bare footprints. Small, maybe child size again. Exactly like the ones under the trestle. My pulse spiked. I flicked off the evidence light and eased around the corner. My flashlight flickered on the cracked concrete pad behind the station. The back door stood ajar, gap wide enough for a small person to slip through. I drew my pistol, thumb resting on the safety, and swept the beam inside. The cramped room beyond was lined with empty shelves, old cleaning supplies, and overturned crates. The door creaked as I nudged it further open. My radio crackled, then died. Only the distant hum of the highway. I moved in, each footstep muffled by dusty linoleum. Near the back wall I found muddy smears, tiny handprints dragging across crates, streaks of brown that glowed darker in the flashlight beam. I crouched, examined the height, roughly 2 feet from the floor. I swallowed, heart pounding. I followed the prints around a stack of boxes to a broken window. Pane shattered, shards glittering on the concrete. I climbed up onto a crate to look out. Below, the gravel lot stretched under the Sinclair sign. Then I saw it. In the far corner, between 2 pumps, a figure crouched. Small, pale in the neon glow, hugging themselves. I eased down and edged to the lot entrance, pistol raised, voice low. "Kid, come here." No response. The figure stayed hunched, shoulders shaking. I stepped into the lot. Gravel crunched. The figure jerked upright. Thin, matted hair, dirty dress clinging to skinny frame, and took off, sprinting toward the highway. I called out, "Stop!" "Sheriff's deputy," and gave chase, boots slipping. The highway was 2 lanes of empty asphalt, fog drifting across the center line. The figure ran onto the road, paused, looking back over the shoulder at me. I slowed, calculating. I didn't want to hit a kid, but I couldn't let them disappear. The figure took another step, then bolted across the road toward the dark silhouette of Woods Creek Elementary down a small side road. I holstered the pistol, radioing dispatch. Suspect fleeing toward school. Need perimeter? No answer. I ran after, adrenaline burning. The side road was a single lane, overgrown at the edges. The school sat silent, its playground deserted. The chain-link fence around it was low, maybe 4 feet, but the gate was locked. I reached the fence as the figure leaped over, arms flailing. I tried to follow, but tangled my foot in the bottom rail and went down hard, skidding across gravel. Pain shot through my knee. The figure was already inside the playground, dark swings swaying, slide glinting in the neon spill. I scrambled up, brushing gravel from my uniform, and ran toward the school's back entrance, which was a solid metal door with no windows. No sign of the kid. I radioed again, voice rough. "Brockton to dispatch. Failed entry at school, suspect gone." Knee twisted. "Need medics?" My voice echoed. No answer. I pressed my hand against the door. It felt warm, as if someone had been leaning there. Underneath the door I saw another set of prints, bare, wet, small. They led away toward the woods bordering the playground. I cursed, sucked in a breath, and limped after them. The woods were thick, trees spaced tight, undergrowth high. My flashlight caught glints of dew on leaves, a low mist weaving through trunks. Each step made twigs crack underfoot, sound too loud in the quiet. I saw the prints vanish at a muddy bank by a culvert. The creek here ran under the road, water splashing into darkness. I knelt, tracing one print, heel to toe, the same size as the doll's hand smears. No doubt. Something wasn't right. I looked up, thinking I might spot the kid hiding in the trees. Instead, I saw footprints walking into the creek, semi-submerged. And then, high among the trees, I caught a flicker of movement, something swinging from a branch, long enough to sway in the breeze. My flashlight's beam drifted to the shape, a length of stained rope tied around a slender twig. I swallowed. The rope end was frayed, nearly unraveling. I lifted the beam behind me. Fresh. Footprints led back toward the gas station, then up the road toward town lights. And there, pressed into the creek's mud, were letters carved shallowly on a flat stone. 3 lines, run. The same as under the trestle, but laid out vertically. I shone the light all around, no sign of life. Just the hum of distant traffic, the chant of cicadas, and the creek's steady gurgle. I limped back to my cruiser, heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. My knee burned with every step. The doll's bag in my hand felt heavy, like it was weighing down my mind. I climbed in, shut the door, radioed dispatch one final time. I'm heading back to station. Need backup on Pine Creek Road, Mill, School, Trestle. Something's going on. These symbols, prints, abandoned items, it's connected. I don't know how, but it's not one child, it's more. Silence answered. I set the doll on the dash, its empty eye catching the green neon as I drove off. Fog swallowed the taillights, and the road ahead stretched endless, waiting to reveal its secrets. I stayed on the road until the glow of Pine Creek Station faded behind me, then turned west onto Mill Road. My knee throbbed with every bump. Fog clung low, drifting across my headlights like slow smoke. I cradled the doll's bag in my lap, its plastic eye catching the ceiling light in the cab. I needed answers, but every clue only deepened the mystery. The doll, the carvings, the footprints, they all pointed to something procedural nightmares are made of. A predator who set the scene and vanished before we arrived. By 4:15 a.m. I reached the mill site. The old lumber mill lay silent, stacks of weathered beams and equipment rusting under tarps. Nobody used it anymore. Not since the fire in 2016 shut the place down for good. I cut the engine, reached for my flashlight, and stepped into the gravel yard. The light beam trembled in my hand, but I forced it steady. Tracks led from the back entrance of the mill's main building toward the sawdust pile. I followed, heart pounding. The door stood open a crack. I pushed in, boots echoing on creaking boards. Inside, the smell of burnt wood and oil sat heavy. In one corner, a toppled milling machine lay coated in dust. On a nearby bench, I spotted something, a half-empty thermos of coffee, still warm. My breath hitched. Whoever was here had been, and had only seconds ago, standing right here. I dusted for prints, found faint boot treads leading deeper into the building. My beam caught movement. A scrap of pink fabric draped over a support beam. Shirt fragment, size child small. I chewed my lip. Whoever took that doll must have paused here. I traced the beam toward the back wall and found another carving. Help us, scratched into the wooden siding, letters ragged and uneven. I crouched to examine. Fresh, splintered wood still damp from the night's dampness. Footsteps pounded behind me. I whirled, gun raised, flashlight sweeping. No one, but I knew I wasn't alone. My radio crackled weakly. Dark trestle, laughter, then cut out. I cursed. Static-born messages and disappearing figures. This was turning into a twisted relay race of clues. I backed toward a stairwell leading up to the loft. My light caught another children's toy, a battered toy truck, its wheels caked in mud. I lifted it and slid it into an evidence bag, finger tight around cold zipper. Upstairs, rafters loomed overhead, loose boards creaking under my weight. I scanned for signs of habitation. Blanket on the floor, leaning against the railing, top corner darkened. I approached, saw indentations. Someone had knelt here, prayed, or wept. Then I heard scuffling below. I pressed my back against the wall and peered over the railing. In the ground floor central area, I saw two shadows moving. Smaller shapes, crouched, darting between machinery. I whispered into my earpiece, "Dispatch Brockton." "I've got movement inside the mill. 2 juveniles." No command reply. I dropped to the stairs, covered them in 3 careful steps, then emerged to find the floor empty. I shook my head, stomach twisting. Cold dread crept up my spine. I turned back toward the loft stairs and froze. Footprints, bare, leading from the loft onto a narrow walkway above the machinery. Someone had walked this path, hoping the echo of metal and wood would mask their steps. I climbed, light beam dancing on rails, until I could crouch on a catwalk overlooking the yard through a broken window. Below, I saw them. 2 children, maybe ages 7 and 9, huddled behind a stack of crates. They held each other, eyes wide, mouths opening in silent sobs. I gripped my radio. "Children here, respond with SWAT," knowing full well no one would come in time. Their faces, pale, tear-streaked, looked up at me through the broken glass. I swallowed hard. "Hey," I called, tone soft. "It's okay, Deputy Brockton." The older child, girl by the dress, shook her head, pointing at the tracks I'd followed in. She whispered something I couldn't hear. I lowered my flashlight. My knee gave a sharp jab of pain, but I forced myself to the walkway's edge. "Can you come out slowly? We can get you someplace safe." She blinked, tears glistening under the beam, but stayed put. A sudden crash, pipes bursting downstairs, sent echoes through the building. My flashlight flickered. In the dim light, I saw movement across the yard, a lone figure, adult-sized, slipping behind a stack of beams. My heart lurched. The children tensed and backed into the corner. I keyed my mic. "Suspect here, possibly armed. I repeat, suspect inside mill. Kids with me. Need immediate assistance." Silence. The flicker grew worse. I switched to backup light. Shadows shifted. The suspect ducked behind the crates, leaving only a silhouette. I couldn't make out features, but I saw the glint of metal. I signaled to the kids, "Go down the stairs and wait by the door." Their small bodies were rigid, but they obeyed, inching backward 1 step at a time. On the final step, a shout from below. Someone called, "Freeze!" My backup had arrived, 2 units, lights off, weapons drawn. With their beam, I saw the suspect, a tall man in a dark hoodie, face obscured, holding a length of rope. He started to speak, low and urgent, but another voice, child's voice, rang out. He said, "Help us," but he never came. The man turned, stalked toward us. My radio clicked. They weren't going to risk it. I shouted, "Drop it now." The man let the rope fall. He stared at the children, eyes empty, and turned and vanished out the back door before we could move. We flooded the ground floor, clearing room by room. But he was gone. Desks overturned, crates shifted, but no rope, no hoodie, only one final clue, a single carved line on the mill's support beam. "Run." Just as before. My radio lit up. Medics needed for the children. As I guided them out, the dawn's first light began to touch the horizon. The children glanced back at the mill, terror still in their eyes. I stood by and watched, heart pounding. I knew this night was far from over, and the real hunt had just begun. I parked 20 yards from the mill's rear exit, headlights off, engine idling softly so my cruiser's dash lights glowed dim. The children were in the back seat, wrapped in space blankets, eyes heavy with fear. Medics had taken their statements, but their trembling lips had only given fragments. Footprints, carvings, distant laughter. I leaned back against my door, knee throbbing, and stared into the gathering dawn. I knew the suspect had vanished into the woods, but my gut told me he hadn't gone far. At 5:10 a.m., after the medics drove the children to the hospital for full evaluation and protective custody, I rolled north along Mill Road in circles, scanning tree lines. The woods were silent now. No laughter, no footprints in fresh mud, just the early fog slinking through trunks. Every rustle made me flinch. Every shifting branch felt like a threat. I wondered if the suspect moved ahead of me, watching from the shadows, tracking my every turn. I parked at the intersection of Mill and Spruce Hollow Road, clicked on my mic. Dispatch, this is Brockton. I'm establishing a perimeter between mile markers 2 and 3 on Mill Road. Suspect possibly armed. Request K9 and air support. The reply crackled. Copy, Brockton. K9 en route. ETA 10 minutes. I tapped my fingers on the wheel, eyes scanning the rearview mirror. My reflection looked drawn. Dark circles under bloodshot eyes. Uniform dirt-smudged, badge tinged with the dawn's light. I thought of my family asleep back home, the 2 boys in their beds, and felt a hollow ache. This was the cost of this job. Long nights, dark secrets, and souls lost in places no one visits. At 5:25 a.m., headlights flickered around me, blue and red, then the armored K9 unit rolled in. 2 deputies, muscular and silent, unloaded a large German shepherd. Handler clicked commands, dog sniffed the air, hackles raised. I climbed out, limped to the rear door, and handed over the doll evidence bag. If he tries to hide anything on him, dog's your best bet, I said, voice low. The handler nodded and slipped the bag into a police duffel. Together we moved to the edge of the woods. The dog plunged into undergrowth, nose to ground, tail high. Fog wrapped branches around its coat as it followed the scent. I watched, breath shallow, listening to distant chirps of awakening birds. Minutes ticked by. Then the dog paused, ears perked. Handler glanced back. Here, he hissed, pointing. I kicked aside brambles. A red-stained scrap of fabric caught on a thorn. I crouched, picked it up, part of a child's dress, torn clean from the seam. My stomach churned. Fresh blood soaked the fibers. Handler whistled softly and dog resumed. We followed a narrow game trail deeper among pines, tree roots twisting over ground like gnarled hands. Then the dog halted at a small clearing. I flipped on my flashlight, sweeping across what looked like an old campsite. Flattened ground, 4 stones arranged in a crude square, charred wood remnants. The circle's center held a rusted bucket. Inside lay a discarded shoe, mud-caked and child-sized. Beside it lay 2 broken crayons, pink and blue. My heart pounded. The children in the mill had said the suspect whispered in color codes before leading them here. I radioed in, found a site, camping ring, shoe, crayons. Probably the same suspect. Holding position for further units. Handler nodded. Dog growled low, staring at a dark shape under a fallen log. We approached, flashlights cutting through thinning fog. Under the log lay a small notebook bound with twine, pages damp but intact. I slipped on gloves, pried off the cover. Inside, scrawled in large, uneven letters, "I see you watching. I hear you calling. Don't look behind. Keep your eyes forward." I shivered. The words felt like a trap, warning, confession. My radio buzzed. Brockton, air unit over Pine Creek Road approaching. ETA 2 minutes. Relief and dread mingled. This forest was waking. Soon we'd be pouring light over every square inch, terrifying the suspect right out of hiding, or sending him underground. At 5:40 a.m., a helicopter's downwash rippled leaves overhead. Spotlights pierced the canopy, illuminating trunks in stark white. I signaled to the handler. Split search. He and the dog east, I head west. We moved off in opposite directions. Communication limited to silent hand signals. I limped along, flashlight hissing through branches, mind racing. As I passed a copse of birch trees, something glimmered. I paused, leaned forward. Tied around a tree trunk, about 5 feet high, was another doll. This one, a ragged teddy bear missing an arm. Its stuffing spilled. I reached out, finger brushing soft fur, and noticed words embroidered on its foot. Whisper. A chill rolled down my spine. Everything pointed to psychological warfare. The suspect wanted to unnerve us, to play this sick game for his pleasure. I shoved the bear into my coat, heart hammering, and continued. The forest opened onto a dried creek bed littered with rocks. Drone lights hovered above, circling in search patterns. I saw 2 deputies sweep past with flashlights, headphones on. I signaled, and they converged. We formed a line, advancing slowly through the creek bed. Halfway across, I spotted prints again, barefoot, dwarfing around rocks, leading toward a collapsed wooden bridge. I moved forward, squad behind me. The bridge was old railway support collapsed into chunks of weathered timber. Beyond, the forest floor rose into a slight knoll. Every step felt heavy, as if the air weighed extra here. I led the line up the knoll. At the summit lay a single wooden crate, lid ajar. I knelt, pried open. Inside were the 2 missing children's shoes, one pink flip-flop, one boy's sneaker, arranged neatly. My breath hissed between teeth. Nearby, carved into a standing stump, the same word. Wait. It was as if someone laid out a tableau specifically for me to find. In that moment, the woods fell silent. No buzzing helicopter, no dog barking, no radio static, just emptiness. I felt watched. I gripped my flashlight like a lifeline. Then, from behind me, a whisper. Deputy, why are you here? The voice was soft, close, yet no one in my line answered. I swung the beam behind me, nothing but shadows and trees. I stood slowly, heart racing. I pressed my hat back on, staring at the crate, then around the clearing. The knoll sloped down to the far edge of treetops, where I saw a shape slip away, slender, tall, wrapped in dark clothing. It paused, head turning toward me, then melted into the timber. Did you see that? I called to my line. The helicopter spotlight swept toward us, illuminating the crate, the cars in the distance, the bundle of toys and shoes. But the suspect was gone. I radioed, voice tight. Suspect sighted on knoll, has escaped. He's taunting us, leaving clues to draw me out. Behind me, the handler and deputies regrouped, faces grim. The dog sniffed at the crate, tail low. I knelt and closed the crate, heart pounding. The doll, the bear, the shoes, they were breadcrumbs in a twisted trail. But to what end? A predator's trophy case, a lure to an even darker place? My radio crackled. Brockton, priority call. Road 27, abandoned farmhouse. Possible break-in report. I gritted my teeth. No time to rest, no time to decipher messages. Just go where he leads, follow him through the night, toward answers or deeper horror. I snapped the crate's lid shut, shouldered my flashlight and seized the bear. I limped down the knoll, past the dried creek bed, toward my cruiser. The day was waking. Birds began their morning song, ignorant of the terror beneath. I climbed in, locked the doors, and flipped on the mic. Dispatch, I'm heading to Road 27. Suspect's pattern indicates he's moving east. Keep air unit overhead. And prep SWAT. This one will end badly if we don't corner him. I cut across Spruce Hollow toward Road 27. Headlights off, relying on the cruiser's parking lamps. My radio crackled again, brief fragment. Farmhouse. Window, moving. I gripped the wheel, heart hammering. Road 27 ran straight, flanked by dense pines whose branches interlocked overhead, blotting out the sky. My knee flared with every bump in the pavement. I swallowed and urged the cruiser forward. At 6:05 a.m., I spotted it. An aging two-story farmhouse set back 20 feet from the road, its white paint blistered and stained. No lights, windows dark, but on the front porch, a single rocking chair swayed gently in a breeze I couldn't feel. My breath caught. That rocking wasn't random. The boards creaked under weight. I killed the engine, radioing dispatch in a hushed tone. Brockton at Road 27 farmhouse. Possible break-in, porch chair moving. Entering now. I approached on foot, flashlight low, pistol drawn. Each step on cracked concrete of the porch echoed in the empty dawn. The rocking slowed as I neared. I lifted my beam to the chair, empty. Yet its seat was damp, glossy in the light. Behind it, the front door hung open, yellowed lace curtain catching on the hinge. I signaled inward and stepped through. The hallway was narrow, walls wallpapered in a faded floral pattern that peeled near the baseboards. My boots whispered across creaking floorboards. To my left, the living room. An antique radio on a small table, dials set to static, speakers sputtering faint hisses. I snapped it off. No owner here. I moved past a cracked mirror. My reflection flickered, uniformed deputy matching a wariness in my eyes. At the end of the hall, a staircase led up. To the right, a doorway opened into a kitchen. I checked the kitchen first. Cabinets yawning empty, sink stained. A single mug, still half full of black coffee, grounds floating on top. Fresh. No doubt someone was here minutes ago. I set the mug carefully on the counter, then noticed scribbles on the wall in what looked like red crayon. "Can't sleep," scrawled repeatedly. Letters jagged, drips like blood. My gut twisted. I stepped back into the hallway and ascended stairs slowly, each board groaning under my weight. The landing held 2 doors, one for a child's bedroom, one for the master. I chose the child's room first. Door cracked, weeping wood. I pushed gently. Inside, pink walls patterned with jumping rabbits. The bed was unmade, sheets rumpled. On the floor, a small glass jar lay shattered, glittering shards among crayons. I knelt, picked up a single blue crayon. It bore a wearer's notch from chewing. I slipped it into a pocket. Suddenly, a low thump from above. Attic. Heart pounding. I nudged the door at the top of the stairs. It swung inward to a dim loft space. Exposed beams, covered furniture, boxes. The beam from my flashlight landed on overturned toys. A doll stroller on its side, teddy bears scattered. Then I saw footprints, bare, tiny, leading toward a hatch in the ceiling. A metal ring dangled from it, handle smeared red. I radioed Brockton to dispatch. Evidence of child here. Attic hatch open. Suspect may be above. No reply. I braced shoulder against the hatch, yanked the ring. The trap door swung up, revealing a ladder ascending into near blackness. I checked my flashlight battery, half charge. I climbed, mind racing. Above was a smaller attic room, slanted ceiling. One small window high on the far wall. The air was colder, musty, as if sealed for years. I swept the beam around. Piles of old clothing, trunks, and in the center a circle of deep gouges in the floorboards, like something sharp dragged repeatedly, carving grooves. I stepped closer and saw letters scrawled in dust. Listen? My radio crackled faintly through the boards. I dropped to one knee, flashlight tip on the floor. Underneath, I caught a reflection. A dark shape behind me, low against the wall. I spun, gun up, beam sweeping. nothing but angle irons and cloth. Turning back, I nearly collided with a small pair of boots resting on the edge of the hatch. I hadn't noticed them before. They were caked in mud, like the ones at the mill. I glanced over the floor's edge. No ladder. Someone had removed it. My pulse hammered. I radioed frantically. "Dispatch. Attic ladder gone. I'm trapped upstairs. Send assistance, SWAT. Suspect probably cut ladder." I holstered the radio, knee weak. I snapped off the beam and let my eyes adjust. The attic window, high above, offered the only exit. It was too narrow to climb, but the glass looked fragile. I padded forward, flashlight beam revealing a smear of red on the sill. I peered out. A drop of 10 feet to the ground, broken branches below. I considered the jump. Broken bones better than a predator's trap. Then the floorboard beside the window shifted under my weight, and a child's voice whispered right behind me. "Deputy Brockton?" I froze. The beam caught movement. At the far corner of the attic, a little girl sat on an overturned trunk, knees drawn to her chest, hair matted. White dress stained with dirt, one eye missing like the doll. Her mouth curved into a smile too wide. I swallowed. "Are you okay?" My voice trembled. She tilted her head. "They want to play." Her eyes glinted in the half-light, nothing human in them now. She slid off the trunk, boots hitting the floor silently. I backed toward the hatch, pistol trained on her. Who wants to play?" No answer. She paused, then dashed toward me with impossible speed. I pulled the trigger. Spent shell clattered. The girl vanished into darkness. I spun in a panic and heard the hatch ring clatter, but the opening was empty. No ladder, no child. My radio crackled weakly. Voices murmured below. They must have breached the front. I shouted, "I'm in the attic. Open the hatch." Silence, then muffled orders. The trapdoor handle rattled as men worked above me. I pressed my back to the wall, breathing hard, gun ready. When the hatch finally opened, a beam of daylight and a boot appeared. "Deputy, are you all right?" a voice called. I blinked, nodded, and they hauled me out. I landed back in the child's room, daylight flooding through windows. But as I took a step forward, I saw on the opposite wall corkboard still tacked in the living room. More red crayon messages, newly scrawled, fresh and bold. "See you upstairs." I froze. My throat went dry. I'd been trapped in that house with a child's voice and broken toys, a predator painting clues that led me in circles. And now he dared me to climb back up where I nearly died. I looked back at the attic hatch, then at the doorway. The house was silent except for my own ragged breathing. The morning sun did nothing to banish the shadows within. I stepped outside, heart pounding, and realized I'd never actually left this nightmare. The house stood empty behind me, whispers of children's laughter drifting from its broken windows. I climbed into my cruiser, shut the door, and checked the doll and teddy bear. Both had tiny notches carved since I'd last seen them. My radio finally crackled to life. "Brockton, are you safe?" "Backup's here." I didn't answer. I stared at the house through the windshield. Maybe he was still inside. Maybe it was another trap. Maybe the children were still up there, whispering to him, pulling him deeper. I turned the key in the ignition, and the engine caught. As I drove away, the back window reflected a flicker of movement. Tiny feet stepping into the attic hatch, the little girl's silhouette grinning in greeting. I slammed the door shut on that image, but it burned into my mind. I had escaped, but the game was far from over. I didn't stop driving until the farmhouse sank behind the trees, its broken windows like dark eyes watching me go. My cruiser's headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the morning mist, every mile marker I passed feeling both like a relief and a betrayal. Relief that I was out of that house. Betrayal, because I knew I'd only scratched the surface of something twisted. By 7:15 a.m., I rolled into the station parking lot under harsh fluorescent lights. My uniform was streaked with mud and dust, coat damp, knee throbbing with every step. Inside, the dispatchers were busy logging calls. A fender bender on Highway 12, a false alarm at the elementary, routine stuff. None of it mattered now. I climbed the stairs to records, each floorboard echoing like a gunshot in the quiet hallway. Records, Officer Vega looked up from her desk, eyebrows rising. "Early start," she said, tone polite but wary. "Long night," I replied, handing her the evidence bag holding the doll, the teddy bear, the crayons, the screwdriver-pried notebook, the red-stained scrap, the thermos, everything pulled from that killer's trail. She set them on her counter, pulled open a ledger, and began logging chain of custody entries. I leaned against the wall, watching her fingers fly across the keyboard. The station felt too small now, walls closing in with reports I couldn't process. I closed my eyes, tasting stale coffee and adrenaline. When Vega finished, she slid the bag back across. Her face was neutral, but her eyes were tired. "What are we looking at, Deputy?" I ran a hand through my hair. Something that's been going on for who knows how long. A predator marking these spots, staging children's items like breadcrumbs. He wants us to follow. She frowned, glancing at the doll's empty socket. "You okay?" "I will be," I said. "Let me get these locked up and I'll file my report." She nodded. I left, passing through the evidence room's heavy door. Inside, steel shelves held plastic bins of case files. I placed the doll in its own cubby, the teddy bear next to it, crayons in a clear envelope. The smell of mildew and instruction manuals filled the air. As I locked the bin, I noticed on the shelf above a manila folder labeled Mill Road Abandoned Vehicle. My own case from the first call. Inside, I'd left a photo of the blue sedan and the crumpled business card. Hours ago, that was mine. Now, it was just another piece of a vast, sick puzzle. I closed the door and found my way to the roll call room for coffee. The boiler hissed as it poured. I poured a cup and drank it black, the bitterness grounding me. Sheriff Nolan's voice came over the intercom. "All units, stand by for briefing." I sighed and followed the other officers into the briefing room. Sheriff Nolan stood at the front, shoulders squared, face grim. He clicked through slides showing maps of Pine Creek Road, Mill Road, the farmhouse on Road 27, and the creek bed. His pointer tapped each location. "Last night was unprecedented," he said. Deputy Brockton found multiple crime scenes involving children's possessions and, most disturbingly, a possible suspect sighting. K-9 unit confirmed fresh blood at a sub-camp, and our air support reported ground movement near the dried creek. We will be redeploying teams to cover these zones this afternoon. Deputy Brockton will lead investigation. I nodded, stomach tight. The map felt like a target on my chest. Every time the sheriff looked at me, I half expected him to see the doubt in my eyes, the exhaustion etched into my face. After briefing, I returned to my desk, opened my case file and stared at the blank report form. My mind was racing. I typed a line, deleted it. Typed another, deleted that. Nothing I could write would capture the night's horrors. This wasn't just paperwork, it was paper boundaries around something that defied classification. My computer pinged. A new message from dispatch. Camera feeds from the farmhouse have been uploaded. Review at your convenience. My heart thumped. They'd installed cameras after the fire, motion sensors that never triggered until last night. I clicked the link. First clip, front porch, timestamp 5:56 a.m. The rocking chair swings slowly, then snaps still as someone steps off it. A child's hand reaches from frame left, dragging the stuffed bear up the stairs. The camera's audio crackles. I can hear my radio in the background. Second clip, kitchen, 5:58 a.m. The door opens on a dark figure. He stops, turns his head, hood blocking his face. He reaches up and scrawls, "Can't sleep" on the wall with red crayon. Then he sets the coffee mug on the counter, the same cup I saw this morning. Third clip, upstairs hallway, 6:01 a.m. The child's room door creaks open. Pink hue of dawn seeps in. The little girl in a dirty white dress steps into view. Empty eye socket glittering in low light. She walks toward the door, same boots I found in the mill, but stops and turns, staring directly into the camera. She leans toward the lens and whispers, "Deputy, play with me." My stomach lurched. I jerked the headphones off. My breath came in ragged bursts. The video paused on her face. Tilted head, crooked smile. Everything inside me screamed to delete the file, to pretend it didn't happen. Instead, I copied it to my thumb drive and locked my office door. I sat back down but couldn't focus. I glanced at the clock, 7:50 a.m. In 10 minutes, I had to lead the research teams. But something else demanded my attention, the radio. I flicked it on low volume, white noise. Then, faint over the static, a child's laughter. Quick, hollow, echoing through the speakers. I spun in my chair, eyes darting. The laughter stopped. I rubbed the speaker, dead static. I turned up the volume. Silence, but my headset cable felt like it buzzed under my fingertips. I shook it off, grabbed my coat and headed downstairs. In the lobby, dispatchers looked up as I passed. No one mentioned the noise over the radio. Maybe they didn't hear it. Maybe I was losing it. I walked toward the exit, phone in hand, ready to coordinate the search. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Still watching. My hand froze. The screen glowed. No contact name, no message after. Just that. I replied simply, "Who is this?" Within seconds, another text arrived. "Deputy, we want to play." A cold sweat broke across my back. I spun, scanning the empty lobby. The evidence room door was ajar. How had I left it open? Inside, my suitcase of exhibits sat where I left it. The doll's head poked through the plastic bag. Next to it lay the teddy bear, but now I could have sworn the bear's one arm had moved, dangling in a different position than this morning. I took a step forward. My radio crackled, and through the static came the little girl's whisper, "Deputy Brockton, let's play again." I dropped my phone and grabbed the radio, pressing the mic, but only static answered. My pulse was a drumbeat in my throat. I realized then that the game had never been about catching him. It was about making me follow his trail. And no matter where I'd go, no matter how fast I ran, he'd always be one step ahead, planting those sick riddles until I answered him. I backed away from the evidence room, heart pounding. The text started another message, one letter at a time. IAMHERE. My knees buckled. I fumbled my radio mic, sputtered into it. "This is Deputy Brockton. Dispatch, suspect sighted." But all that came back was laughter. High-pitched, childish, echoing through the station walls. It grew louder, as if someone stood right behind me, then faded, leaving only the steady hum of fluorescent lights and my own ragged breathing. I turned and ran for my cruiser, siren wailing to life as I hit the button. The lobby windows showed only emptiness, no faces, no threats. Yet I knew, as the engine roared, that the next time I looked in the rearview mirror, I'd see her sitting there, boots up on the seat, grinning that awful grin, waiting for me to play again. I slipped into the driver's seat just past midnight. headlights cutting through a low blanket of fog that clung to the fields like ghostly arms. My name's Carter Holt, deputy with the Savage County Sheriff's Office, and on nights like this, I swear the darkness has its own weight. The dashboard clock read 12:17, but it might as well have been 4 in the morning. I'd been up since 8, jittery from 3 cups of coffee and an empty stomach. The radio crackled once, then static swallowed it whole. Out here, backup feels like a promise you pray never arrives too late. My first call came at 12:23. The Hayworth Barn, open-door alarm, 17 miles west on County Road 19. I punched the button on the mic. "This is Holt, en route to Hayworth Barn, ETA 10 minutes. The dispatcher's voice flickered in and out. "Copy, Holt. Use caution, past reports of prowlers." I eased the Crown Victoria down the gravel, the tires crunching and sending bits of stone dancing off into the darkness. Every dip in the road rattled my teeth. I thumbed off the overhead lights to preserve night vision, leaving only the soft glow of my instrument panel. The barn came into view like a lurking silhouette, its metal roof dark against the cloudy sky. A single bulb above the sliding door pulsed erratically, as though someone farther down the power line was flicking it on and off. I killed the engine and strained to hear anything beyond my own heartbeat. The only sounds were distant cattle lowing and the wind scissoring through dead corn stalks. I stepped out, boots crunching on gravel, and grabbed my flashlight and pistol before slipping off the flashlight's safety. Inside, hay bales towered like silent sentinels. A broken pallet lay against a wall, and sawdust was scattered across the floor. My beam caught the dented crate first, its lid cracked open, metal hinges bent. Whoever had pried it left claw marks in the wood. I crouched, drawing in a slow breath. My radio crackled again, and I froze. "Holt, you there?" the dispatcher asked. My voice was calm, measured. "I'm here. No one's inside, but it looks like a break-in. Send it back to dispatch." I let the words hang, though they sounded hollow in this empty space. Something nudged my neck hairs upright. I swept the flashlight toward the back exit and saw tire tracks in the dirt beyond the open door. Fresh tracks, no older than 6 hours, leading toward the silo behind the barn. I followed, careful to step in the deeper imprints, leaving my own footprints shallow. The silo door was padlocked, but scuffed paint and rust streaks showed where someone had twisted the lock repeatedly. My flashlight beam caught a shadow moving at the edge of my vision. I spun, heart stuttering, pistol raised. Nothing there. The beam landed on a broken wooden ladder leaning inside the silo, each rung gouged and worn. I radioed for a unit to do a perimeter check. While I waited, I studied the tracks again. They veered off toward a stand of pines hugging the fence line. I called it in, voice tighter than I felt. Tracks head into woods. No sign of suspect. Recommend K9. The dispatcher acknowledged, and I heard the distant engine of the next patrol car rolling across gravel. I closed the silo door and double-locked it, then returned to my cruiser. The barn doors groaned as I left, a sound so human it made my skin prickle. An hour later, still crawling on empty coffee and adrenaline, I checked in at the abandoned diner on Highway 8, relic of the 70s with flaking aqua paint and a neon sign that buzzed like an angry hornet. I let the engine warm in the chill air, stretched my legs, and took a swig of lukewarm coffee from a styrofoam cup. Static hissed in my ear as I flicked the radio channel. Nothing but dead air. I thumbed the mic. "All units, status check." A chorus of acknowledgments came back, each one sounding further away than the last. That's when Frost pulled up in his Tahoe. Frost is the lone sergeant on night shift, bulky as an oak and quiet as one, too. He walked past my open door without a word, climbed atop the diner's overhang, and peered across the lot toward the old motel 2 blocks away. "You hear about the kid?" he asked without turning. I shook my head. He pointed at the shuttered neon sign, Motel 66. Rancher called in, screaming about hearing a girl crying inside that old room. Frost dropped down, dusting his sleeve. "We checked it yesterday, found nothing but mice and broken furniture." He stuffed his hands in his jacket pockets, gaze hooded. "Try your luck?" We rolled down the cracked pavement, warning lights off to preserve my night vision. At the motel, the hallway reeked of damp carpet and cigarette smoke. Room 6's door was ajar, peeling mustard-colored paint curled like dead skin. I kicked it lightly. The door swung wide, and my footsteps echoed inside. A battered suitcase lay open on the bed, clothes spilled across stained sheets. A single doll sat on a pillow, its eyes missing, mouth frozen mid-scream. Frost swept his flashlight across the far corner. The beam caught a dark shape, crouched low, then flashed back empty. My heart pounded against my ribs like a frantic drum. I would have sworn I heard whispering. So soft I thought I imagined it. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Frost nodded, flashlight trained on the closet. He stepped forward, bayoneted knife ready. I felt my pulse in my throat as he yanked the closet door open. Nothing. But when he looked back, Frost's face was pale. "I saw movement," he said. "Something slipped behind that dresser." Cool sweat broke on my neck as we inched toward the dresser. Edges splintered. I placed my hand on it, pushed. It slid to the right, revealing footprints leading under the bed. We both froze, shining lights onto the floor. No footprints, just dusty planks. We left without finding a soul. Frost radioed in, voice low. False alarm. But I knew better. Something had been there. My flashlight beam caught a smear of red on the carpet's edge, dried, faint. The only other detail, 3 small scratches on the lower frame of the dresser, spaced like fingers wrapped around a throat. I swallowed. Frost gave me a look that asked if I was crazy. I shrugged, but my fingers itched to grip my pistol. By 2 a.m, I was more bone-weary than I'd ever been. I flagged down my cruiser again and slumped behind the wheel, the heater clicking on but doing nothing to warm my chest. The radio crackled, and I almost didn't answer. Then the dispatcher said, "Deputy Holt, be advised. Vehicle left abandoned on County Road 11, headlights still on, no plates." I sighed, massaging my jaw. "Copy, on my way." I switched on the cruiser's lights and aimed north. County Road 11 was a straight shot, 2 miles of black asphalt lined by cornstalks 10 feet tall. When I arrived, the sedan sat askew, door open like an invitation. The engine idled, white exhaust trailing upward like a warning. Gravel crunched under my boots as I approached, flashlight in one hand, pistol in the other. I climbed in, the seatbelt still buckled. The radio mic was within reach. I picked it up. "Dispatch, this is Holt. I'm at the vehicle. No sign of driver." That's when I saw him in the rearview mirror. Figure standing in the headlight glare, face hidden beneath a hood, arms folded. My breath caught. I swung around, pistol raised, but the road behind was empty, no footprints, no car. I whirled back to the sedan. The figure remained unmoving. I radioed for immediate backup, hands shaking so badly I could barely hit the button. The dispatcher's voice came through fast. "Units 2 minutes out." I locked eyes with the silhouette. It tilted its head slightly as if curious. My blood ran cold. I slammed the door shut, threw the cruiser in reverse, and peeled out before I even heard the siren. I never thought I'd make it back to the station alive. And that night wasn't even half over. The station lights felt harsh when I finally stumbled inside, boots still slick with sweat and gravel. My uniform jacket was rumpled, collar twisted, badge smudged from slamming the cruiser door. I declawed the pistol from its holster, heart still rattling like a loose chain, and set it on the desk beside my half-drunk coffee. The dispatcher hovered over the radio console, eyes flicking between me and the scope of incoming calls. "You all right, Holt?" she asked, voice low. I nodded, swallowing hard. "Back to back," I muttered, wiping my palms on my pants. My words echoed off the cinder-block walls. By 2:15, I was back on patrol. No break, no backup in sight. The cold air hit me like a wall when I stepped outside, frost glinting on the cruiser's hood. I punched the seat warmer on for a few seconds, then off again. Couldn't let myself get too comfortable. I flipped the overhead lights back on and eased away from the station. Radio cutting loose another static hiss. I tuned in the local weather channel. Wind gusts picking up to 20 miles per hour. Chance of drizzle before dawn. Perfect conditions for hiding footprints or sending your scent swirling like a secret. I shivered, tugged my collar higher. My next assignment was closer to home. Riverbank Road, just 6 miles east. A jogger had flagged down a neighbor who called it in, footsteps crossing the wooden walkway over the creek, then sudden screams that cut off like someone hit mute. The complainant said she saw a shadow dart into the cattail marsh when she answered the door. I drove slowly, headlights painting long, lean shapes onto the wet road. The creek's water was low this time of year, but the bridge squeaked with every gust. I pulled onto the shoulder, boots crunching onto damp dirt. The jogger, an older man named Collins, waited by a pickup, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. He paced, darting glances toward the bridge. "Sir," I said, stepping close enough to smell cedar and a hint of cigarette smoke. "Can you show me where?" He nodded, voice hollow. "Right, here." He pointed to the walkway's far end where the wooden planks were worn smooth, and the creek gurgled underneath. That's where I heard her cry out. But when I looked, nothing but ripples. His eyes flicked past me into the marsh. Felt like someone was watching. I clicked on my flashlight and walked to the center of the bridge, beam swinging over murky water and tangled reeds. I crouched, examining the planks. No footprints. Too smooth. I ran a fingertip across a splintered groove inside. My breath came out in a white mist. A sudden rumble rolled beneath my feet. My boots jumped, heart vaulting. A hollow moan drifted up from the creek, like a child calling for help, weak and desperate. I swore under my breath and trained the flashlight straight down. Nothing but dark water swirling around a submerged log. I radioed Collins to stay back, edged toward the railing, peering over. The glow from my light caught a pale shape drifting beneath the surface. I leaned farther, vertigo snapping at my senses, but the shape was gone as soon as it passed under a rock. I stumbled back, hand slapping the railing. The jogger's breath came in ragged pants. "Saw it?" he whispered. I shook my head, my pulse pounded. "Could be reflection," I said, though I didn't believe it. I checked the nearby undergrowth with my light, only marsh grasses and fallen branches. No hiding spots, no footprints leading away. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Frost. "You good?" Backup at the barn. In 10 seconds I knelt, scanning every shadow for a sign, but there was nothing. I stood and tapped the rail for Collins. "You got the right story?" He nodded, voice wavering. "Swear it." I radioed it in, voice flat. "Possible hoax or animal noise. I'll patrol the area." Inside, the cruiser's headlights glowed on the bridge, casting long reflections in the creek. I sat behind the wheel, hands tight on the wheel, and watched for movement in the reeds. the moan came again, so faint I thought it in my head. By the time I'd killed the lights and stepped out, it was gone. Back on the road, every bump felt like an ambush. The dashboard clock flashed 2:47. My eyes burned, and my jaw ached from clenching too hard. I peeled onto County Road 37, the route toward the old Hunter farm. A vacant house where a silent alarm had tripped at 3:02. I hit the shoulder, stepping out into cold that tasted like metal. The farmhouse sat alone behind a splintered fence, slats missing, window panes cracked. A single bulb by the stoop flickered once every 10 seconds. I lifted my flashlight and crossed the lawn, gravel crunching underfoot. The front door was ajar, swinging with a skeletal creak. I called in my approach. "Deputy Holt to Hunter Farm," I said. "Silent alarm, investigating." The hallway inside smelled of mildew and rot. I swept the beam down the corridor, bare walls, footprints of dust showing patterns of early morning chores once left undone. A broken screen door lay on the floor near the back entrance. I advanced, pistol drawn, ears straining for the slightest creak or whisper. I came to the kitchen and found the sink strewn with rusted tools, pliers, a hacksaw, an oil-stained rag. The back door hung open. I shone my light into the yard and saw tire tracks in the grass. Fresh. They arced toward the barn, wide and deep. I climbed the threshold and stepped outside, wind whipping my flashlight beam across a field of dead wheat stalks that snapped and rustled like bones. I followed the tracks to the barn, each a step more deliberate, chest tightening with every breath. The barn doors gaped open on one side, darkness flooding out. Inside, my light revealed a makeshift shrine, a wooden crate surrounded by empty beer bottles, a single boot standing upright in the center. My stomach clenched. I approached, gut churning. The boot was scuffed and muddy. Women's boot, size small. I knelt, ran gloved fingers over the leather. Something crunched beneath. I swept away discarded straw to find a small silver locket. I opened it with trembling thumb. Inside was a faded photograph of a teenage girl smiling. My pulse screeched. I scanned the darkness beyond, heart pounding. The barn's rafters creaked, and I thought I heard a soft whimper behind, the far wall. I called out, voice steady but tight. "This is Deputy Holt. Show yourself." Silence answered. Then a muffled sob, low and distant. I moved deeper, pistol raised, shining light on rusted farming equipment lined against the wall. The sob grew louder. I paused at a corner where a mildewed tarp hung like a shroud. I yanked it aside, empty space, just shadows. The crying stopped abruptly. My head snapped up as footsteps scuffed just beyond the beam. I spun, nothing. My radio crackled to life, Frost's voice, urgent. "Holt, back to barn. K9 units got something." Relief slammed into me. "On my way," I said, voice raw. I turned to dash for the cruiser but froze at the sound of someone whispering my name. "Deputy Holt?" It was faint, teasing, right behind me. I swung around, pistol trained on empty air. The barn was empty, save for that single boot and the locket in my hand. I exhaled slow, heart pounding so hard I thought it might tear free. I slipped the locket into my pocket, holstered my pistol, and ran back to the road, kicking up Frost in fear that trailed me until I saw Frost's headlights cut through the gloom. By 4 a.m., I'd passed 3 more calls. A stranded motorist claiming someone was pounding on her trunk, a report of coyotes behaving too confidently in the schoolyard, and a loud crash behind the closed hardware store. Each time I found only emptiness. Doors locked, windows dark, the echo of my own flashlight beam. The tally in my notebook grew. Barn alarm, motel cries, abandoned sedan, jogger screams, farmhouse shrine. All unanswered questions, each more tangled than the last. As sunrise threatened the horizon, I turned back toward the station, body aching and mind fraying. The road stretched out, straight and featureless, cornfields on either side hiding whatever lurked beyond. My radio lay silent, and for the first time since midnight I felt utterly alone. I flicked off the headlights and coasted, engine idling low, waiting to see if something would step out into the pale glow of dawn. But the road stayed empty, waiting too. I didn't stop for breakfast or a break. My eyes stung from blinking against the cold wind, and my mouth felt like sandpaper by the time I pulled back onto County Road 22. I needed to clear my head, but there was no time. Another silent alarm had tripped at the old Sinclair station 3 miles ahead. The sign's vinyl letters were faded to nearly nothing, and the pumps stood idle behind a cracked concrete pad. The fuel lines had been cut years ago, but the building still held the smell of gasoline as though it had never left. I killed the cruiser's engine before the pad light, half dead and flickering, announced my arrival with a dull buzz. I stepped out, rifle in hand, and scanned the darkness. The station's front doors were boarded. One of the boards had been pried loose, leaving a gap just wide enough for a flashlight beam. I crouched and peered inside. The main room was a skeleton. Empty shelves, a glass display case shattered, and a motley collection of empty bottles scattered across the tile floor. I kicked at a broken radio beside the counter. Static hissed, then died. I radioed dispatch. Halt to dispatch. Sinclair Station, clear exterior. Boards pried on front door. The reply came quick. Copy that. You sure it's clear? We've had reports of someone crouching inside. I hesitated. Could have been raccoons or stray cats, but that jitter in my gut told me not to dismiss it. I switched off my torch and stepped through the broken board, flashlight slicing a cone of light across cracked linoleum. Dust motes danced like embers. The only sound was the echo of my own breathing. A sudden clang from the back office jolted me. My heart jackhammered. I swept the light toward the noise. An overturned file cabinet lay in the corner, its drawers ripped open. Papers fluttered as though caught in a silent breeze. I moved slowly, boots clicking on tile, and edged around to the office door, ajar, swinging like a pendulum. I nudged it with the muzzle of my rifle. Inside, a chair lay on its side, desk lamp smashed, and a ledger book splayed open on the floor. The pages had been torn out, leaving ragged edges that pointed toward the back exit. I followed the torn sheets into the alley behind the station, littered with discarded crates and empty boxes. My flashlight caught movement. A shadow flitted across the far wall, too quick to be a rat. I cursed under my breath and quickened my pace, rifle trained on the dark corner where the wall met the fence. There was nothing but staining from old leaks and a single tire track leading toward the street. I dropped to one knee, studying the tread. Narrow, worn, likely from a motorcycle or a small ATV. I radioed for a perimeter check. Halt, I'm tracking tire marks to the west side. Recommend unit coverage on both roads. The dispatcher responded that Frost was en route. After clearing the next call, but that could be 10 minutes. I stood and replayed what I'd seen. The board, pry marks, the hurried exit, the small tread. Whoever it was moved fast, light on their feet. I squared my shoulders and headed back to the cruiser, tension thrumming beneath my skin. But as I reached the driver's door, I caught it in the corner of my eye. Something perched on the pump island, frozen in place. A silhouette of a man, hunched over as though inspecting something. I frowned, heart picking up speed. I clicked off my torch and knelt behind the cruiser, safety on the rifle engaged, and peered across the pad. The figure hadn't moved. I counted to 10 before flipping on the beam, empty. No footprints, no traces, just emptiness under the flickering pad light. I climbed in and idled away, radio silent. My hands trembled around the wheel, and I willed my pulse down. The dash clock read 5:12, and dawn was still an hour off. On the scanner, dispatch read out a 911 call from a local bar. Someone claiming a man in a trench coat was leaving personal items strewn across the parking lot. I sighed. A call like that could be drunks or a prowler trying to spook me. I punched the overhead lights on and turned south toward Lawson's bar, headlights piercing the dark lot. By the time I arrived, the parking lot was deserted. Broken stools lay scattered on the pavement, and a single boot, right foot only, rested near the door. I killed the engine, wedges of dread pressing my lungs closed. I grabbed my flashlight and pistol again and stepped out, boots crunching over glass and gravel. The bar door was cracked, though windows were intact. I rapped the stock metal door with my fist, no answer. I tried the handle, it turned, and the door swung inward, groaning. Inside, the neon beer sign still glowed, blue and red halos against the dark walls. The bar top was sticky with spilled ale. My beam swept across dartboards with cracked surfaces and half-filled ashtrays. Then I saw them. A row of personal items laid out on the bar, wallet, keys, phone, and beside them a folded note. I picked it up with gloved fingers. One line scrawled in shaky handwriting, "Choose now or never." My stomach turned. I checked the items. None belonged to me. Whoever left them had created a puzzle. I stepped toward the stage where live music used to echo on Saturday nights. The curtains were drawn tight, and I could hear the faint hum of electricity behind them. I approached and pulled the heavy fabric aside. Empty stage, instruments stacked in the corner. Then I spotted it. On the floor, a single glove, matching the boot outside, its palm stained dark. I crouched, beam fixed on the glove's frayed edge, as though someone had tried to rip free. A soft scuff behind me made me whirl. Nothing. The beam caught the jukebox's chrome edge, next to the broken coin slot. Its speakers crackled to life unbidden, playing a warped version of an old country tune I couldn't place. The voice came through tinny and slow, lyrics garbled. I froze, heart pounding. The song ended, and the crackle returned. I killed my light and stepped back. The outline of the bar's front window reflected my silhouette, tall and tense. A second later, headlights flickered past outside, frost pulling in. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and stepped into the light. He jumped down from his Tahoe and met me at the door. His face was set, mouth tight. "You hear that?" he asked, voice low. I nodded toward the jukebox, still dark. He didn't need to ask twice. We both knew something had been here to toy with us. We cleared the bar, found no sign of an intruder, only the glove, the boot, and the note. I bagged the glove and snapped pictures of the layout. Frost radioed it in. Unknown party left personal effects, note, and staged glove. No suspect. He looked at me, eyes hard. "This one's personal," he said. "They're playing a game." I slid my bandaged fingers across my forehead, cold sweat turning to gooseflesh. "Yeah," I said, "and we're the pieces." We left the bar just before the first hint of sunrise crept over the horizon. The sky bled pale orange and pink, mocking the darkness we'd chased all night. I keyed the mic, Holt to dispatch. Station for debrief and shift change. My voice sounded hollow, as though someone else had picked up my radio. Frost nodded once, and we drove in silence back toward the station, headlights illuminating empty roads where shadows still clung to the edges. The world was waking up, oblivious to what we'd encountered. But for me, the questions remained. Who had set these traps? What was the end game? The personal items, the note, the staged scenes. Each trace was deliberate, designed to draw us deeper into someone's twisted design. And as the sun finally breached the fields, warming my face through the windshield, I felt a chill that would stick with me long after this shift ended. There was no rest for a deputy on nights like these, only a promise that the darkness would return, bringing fresh horrors waiting to be discovered. I pulled back onto the highway in the raw light of dawn, eyelids heavy and muscles knotted from hours of tension. Every curve of the road felt sharper, every mile marker a reminder that I was still out here, still chasing a ghost. At 6:23 a.m., the morning shift was supposed to arrive, but I wasn't ready to hand this off. I needed answers, and I had a hunch the answers were closer than I wanted to admit. I turned onto County Road 12, heading toward the spot where Mayor Ellis's car had been found abandoned 2 nights ago. Her sedan had been parked perfectly in the shoulder, engine cool, doors locked. No footprints around it, no sign of forced entry, just the morning dew collecting on the hood in perfect beads. The case file called it missing person, but after everything else, I wasn't calling it anything. I marked the turnoff in my mental map, slowed to 20 miles per hour, and pressed the brake lightly so the grille's amber lights glowed. The fields on either side were brown stubble, scorched by last week's drought, and the air smelled of dust and rot. As I approached the clearing, the gravel shoulder gave way to uneven dirt, and I eased the cruiser onto the soft ground. The sedan sat ghost white against the dark green of a pine copse that rose abruptly at the edge of the field, like a doorway into another world. I killed the engine and slipped out, boots sinking into soft earth. My torch gave the car a false brightness, and I circled it slowly, careful to note any disturbances. The doors were locked, the windows up. I tapped on the driver's side glass. "Ma'am?" My breath puffed in the cold. No answer. A breeze rattled the pine needles overhead like dry bones. I keyed the mic. "Dispatch, Deputy Holt at missing person vehicle. No sign of—" My voice caught. I clicked off. Something on the asphalt caught my light. A broken pen, barrel snapped in half, ink pooling in the cracks. Next to it, a sticky stain that glinted too red in the beam. I swallowed, crouched, and touched it with a gloved fingertip. It was warm, fresh. I froze, pistol drawn, swirling the beam across the clearing. No footprints, no tire tracks, just the clean edge where the field met the asphalt. Then I heard it, the faint melody of a child's music box playing somewhere to my left. My head snapped toward the trees. The tune was tinny and warped, drawn out in archaic notes that undercut the early morning calm. I stared at the pine trunks, expecting feet or a coat to appear. Instead, one of the tree roots shifted, as though something beneath had nudged it. The melody stopped abruptly. My heart seemed to dip and register an echo. I forced myself to move, stalking toward the edge of the copse. Needles crunched underfoot. The temperature dropped a few degrees, and I could see my breath swirl between the trunks. My flashlight beam bounced across thick bark and cut through deep shadows. At the center of the grove, a clearing about 10 feet across, the snow-dusted ground was bare, the pine needles swept aside in a near-perfect circle. In that circle lay a quilt, handmade patchwork of bright colors. I swallowed, kneeling to brush my gloved fingers over the faded fabric. The quilt was stiff with something. Blood? I realized with a jolt that it was wet and sticky. My radio exploded with chatter. The morning shift calling in, asking for details, asking if I was okay. I ignored them, focusing on the quilt. In one corner, stitched in blue thread, was the name M. Ellis, 03-14-1972, Mayor Ellis's birthday. My chest tightened. The quilt's edge was folded back. revealing something nestled at its center, but the beam caught it only for a heartbeat before the world went black. My headlights had flickered off. The static in my radio spiked. I reached to kill the radio, but the mic crackled on its own. Deputy Holt. The voice was slow, intimate, familiar. It was my own voice, recorded, warped, playing back to me. My pistol hissed as I cocked it, beam swinging frantically. The copse was empty, silent except for the distant hum of cicadas waking with the sun. I drew in a breath so hard I thought my ribs would crack. I turned back to the clearing. The quilt lay still, but I could see what had caused the stain, a single glove, matching the one I'd found in Lawson's bar, soaked through, fingers splayed. Next to it, the broken pen lay atop a photograph. Mayor Ellis smiling at a ribbon-cutting ceremony 2 years ago, flanked by townspeople. Someone had cut it out and placed it there, as though inviting me to remember. The photograph's edges were slick with moisture, and when I moved the beam, I saw faint footprints leading back into the trees. Small, too small for an adult. A slender footstep behind me made me spin. My beam caught a slender silhouette at the edge of the clearing, too tall for a child, but too slight for most adults. For a moment I thought it was Frost, come to back me up. Then the figure stepped into the light and it was me. My own face, pale, eyes hollow, uniform stained and torn. I stumbled back, pistol shaking. Cold wind whipped through the trees, and the figure advanced one slow step. Before I could fire, the world tilted. I woke on my back in the middle of the clearing, the quilt gone, the glove gone, the photograph gone. The copse was quiet, empty except for me and my pounding heart. The sun had broken over the horizon, lighting the tops of the pines in gold. My pistol lay 10 feet away, farther than I could reach. My radio was dead. The gravel shoulder was bare. Mayor Ellis's sedan was gone. No footprints marked the dirt where I'd parked. Nothing but an empty field and the weight of my own breath. I sat up, hands trembling, and scanned the tree line. There, etched into the bark of the largest pine at the edge of the copse, was a single word carved deep: Holt. Beneath it, a date I didn't recognize. April 7th, 2026. I pressed my palm against the rough bark, nails biting flesh as I tried to make sense of the carving. The date was 8 months in the future. A fresh breeze rustled the branches overhead, and I could have sworn I heard that warped music box melody begin again, faint and distant, calling me deeper into the darkness. I scrambled to my feet, heart lurching. The highway lay back there somewhere, but I didn't dare move. I stared at the carving, mouth dry. Time slid sideways in that hollow grove, and I realized with a chill that I was on someone else's timeline now, someone who knew my name, my fears, and the pace of my heartbeat. I lifted my gaze to the rising sun filtering through the pines, expecting salvation in daylight. Instead, I felt the darkness of night coil in my chest like a snake, reminding me that it never really goes away. Not for me, not for deputies on nights like these, not when someone else is writing the final chapter. And then the melody returned, louder now, playing from somewhere behind me, as though the forest itself was humming it in anticipation. I pushed myself to my feet and stumbled backward, every muscle protesting as I glanced once more at the carving on the pine. Holt, 04.07, 2026. The letters were raw and freshly cut, their edges rough against the weathered bark. My breathing came in ragged gasps, cold sweat clinging to the back of my neck. The world felt impossibly large and crushingly small all at once. Dawn's pale light should have felt like relief, but the canopy overhead turned it into sickly green shadows that slithered at my feet. I dared not move toward the highway. I felt trapped. My mind raced. How had I been lured here? What game was this? It was like someone had rehearsed every beat of my night shift, knew my breaks, my routes, my weaknesses, and now they were writing the story themselves. I swallowed dryly, eyes flicking around the perimeter of the grove. The triple lines of pine trunks formed an almost perfect circle, and I realized the trees themselves had been shaped by the wind and soil long before any hand tried to carve them. It was as if this place had always existed just to trap me. I forced my legs to hold me upright. The radio in my pocket crackled to life with the distant voices of the morning shift, exchanging routine banter. I tried the push-to-talk. Deputy Holt, I need immediate... Static cut in and out, turning my own voice into a broken echo. I dropped the mic, cursed under my breath, then stepped back into the clearing, scanning every patch of earth for footprints. But the soft loam was unbroken, free of any sign that someone had even been here, except for that carving. It was impossible. Human feet had to have pressed into the ground to carve the bark. Either the ground there was hard as stone, or someone had vanished without a trace. I shone my flashlight at the forest floor more closely. Pine needles blanketed most of the ground, but beneath the carving tree, I saw a pattern of circles in the leaf litter. Disturbed debris, but not footprints. I bent low and picked up a single flake of dried pine bark, pressed between my thumb and forefinger. It cracked apart in my grasp, revealing a ribbon of red blood. Not fresh, more like dried for days, but still unmistakable. A chill shot through me. Whatever had carved my name here had drawn blood from something. Maybe from me. Maybe from another victim. My hand slid down the trunk, fingertips trailing over crude notches that formed a line beneath the date. I counted 13 marks, perhaps days, perhaps bodies, perhaps hours. The symbolism was deliberate. Someone wanted me to see this, to realize I was part of a sequence that began long before I arrived and would continue long after. The trees creaked and I flinched, as if they were whispering to each other, warning me that I didn't belong. I spun on my heel and sprinted out of the grove, branches clawing at my jacket, boots slipping on the damp earth. My heart was a hammer in my chest. I burst into the open field and scanned the horizon, empty. The pine copse behind me was just a dark outline now, its secrets buried in shifting shadows. I raced back to where I thought my cruiser had been, but the dirt shoulder was bare. No tire ruts, no skid marks, just unbroken ground. My head snapped up. I realized I'd come in on the far side of the clearing. I doubled back, stumbling over tufts of grass, adrenaline igniting my legs. When I reached the shoulder, my cruiser was gone. Gone. Just like the quilt and the glove. I stopped, chest heaving, mind screaming. If they could steal my car from a spot I knew, under conditions I controlled, then nothing was real. I pounded a fist against the palm of my other hand, disbelief mingling with rage. I reached for my radio again, but it was dead. My phone lay on the ground where I'd fallen, screen cracked, battery drained. No GPS, no map, no way to call for help. The isolation I'd once bristled against as part of this job was now a knife twisting inside me. I tried to orient myself by the sun, but it was only just cresting the tree line, and the field looked endless. Every direction looked the same. I swallowed against the lump in my throat and forced a slow breath. Logic told me not to panic, but my body was on fire. I dropped to one knee, searched the dirt with my fingers, and found a solitary rectangle of leather. My badge holder snapped open. The badge itself was gone. I stared at the empty leather casing. Losing my badge was like losing my identity. It meant someone else controlled the narrative now. Whoever set this up wanted more than fear. They wanted to break me. I stood, forcing blood back into my legs, and made a decision. I would follow the edge of the tree line until I found a road. Anywhere but this clearing. I picked a direction and plunged into the pines again, heedless of branches whipping my face. The forest closed in, thick with ancient trunks and tangled underbrush. My flashlight beam bounced off gnarly roots, half-buried rocks, and squealing insects bursting from disturbed leaf litter. I kept my head down, slogged through mud patches, stumbled over hidden depressions. Each step felt like wading through tar. Then I heard it. A low rumble that wasn't wind or wildlife. It felt beneath the ground like an earthquake's heartbeat. I froze, straining to place it. My ears popped with sudden static, and then, unmistakably, the melody returned. That warped music box tune, tinny and drawn out. It was coming from my right, deeper in the woods. My breath caught. It played one incomplete phrase, then halted. I swallowed, raised my pistol and pointed the beam into the darkness. The trees ahead were unmarked, no clearing, no pathway, but the sound had been somewhere between those two oaks. I advanced with caution, each footstep deliberate. The rumble grew into a low hum, like a diesel engine idling under the soil. I knelt and touched the ground, vibrations, faint but real. Not far from me, shining through the gloom, was a wire looped around a tree trunk. It disappeared into the shadows both above and below ground. I trailed the wire with my flashlight and realized it led to a camouflaged panel set into the base of a massive pine. The wood grain was too regular, as if it had been cut and reattached. My pulse pounded. I pressed my knuckles against the panel. It shifted under my fist. I yanked it open with a grunt. Inside was a small, dusty compartment housing an old portable tape recorder. Next to it, a stack of micro-cassette tapes labeled in neat handwriting. And so on. One for each day I'd been on this case. The last tape was labeled, "My Blood Ran Cold." Carefully, I lifted the recorder and pressed the play button. Static crackled, then a familiar voice. Mine, recorded. Folks listening now, if you found this tape, know that everything you've seen, the alarms, the missing cars, the shrine, is part of something bigger. I can't explain why they chose me, but they've been watching this town longer than I've been on patrol. These woods hold secrets older than our oldest memories, secrets that feed on your fear. The rest was drowned out by static, then a sudden jolt as the tape snapped off the spindle. I dropped the recorder, heart hammering. The melody started again, live this time, not from the tape, drifting through the trees as though the forest itself had become a music box. I realized with a sickening clarity that the voices on those tapes were recordings of me, made earlier that morning, or perhaps tomorrow morning, if someone's date was correct. They wanted me to play along, to become the narrator of their story, to trap me in a loop I could never escape. The hum beneath the ground swelled into a throb, and the forest lights dimmed, as if clouds had swallowed the sun. My flashlight flickered, then died, leaving me in half-light. My pistol felt useless against whatever machinery or ritual had been buried here. I backed away, tripping over exposed roots, trying to find the path I'd come in on, but the trees closed ranks, blocking every direction. The music box tune rose in volume, twisting into a discordant chord. Then the tape recorder's speaker crackled one last message, my own distorted voice laughing. "Welcome home, Deputy Holt. The story continues." I screamed into the gathering gloom, but the forest only answered with shrieking branches and the final fractured notes of that warped melody, and I realized the twist wasn't just that someone had written my name on a tree with tomorrow's date. The twist was that I was already a character in someone else's design, lost in pages I could never tear out. And as the darkness pressed in, I understood there would be no resolution. I remember the night I first heard the alarm, how the silence felt thicker than any storm I've faced in 20 years on patrol. It was July, 2 weeks before the county fair, and the night air held the promise of heat in every breeze. I was 3 hours into my shift, rolling east on County Road 58, when dispatch cut in. Unit 17, silent alarm at 247 Old Mill Road, check the farmhouse. The words hung in the speakers like a half-forgotten warning. I edged my cruiser off the asphalt and onto dirt that crunched under the tires. Loose gravel skittered over the fenders and muttered like distant thunder. My heart thumped in time with the engine's idle. I flicked on the overhead lights, then killed them again as I slid out. I did not want to announce my arrival. At this hour, the only company you have is your own shadow. The farmhouse stood alone against a backdrop of fields choked with tall corn and wild weeds. A single porch light sputtered, its bulb buzzing in erratic bursts. I crept forward, boots pressing into damp earth, and reached the front door. It was cracked just enough to let a thin ribbon of light and something else slip out. The alarm buzzed faintly inside, deep and hollow like a wounded animal. I unholstered my flashlight and pushed the door. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with dust and the scent of rotting wood. The walls were bare, save for a single hook that once held a lantern. The bench in the corner sagged under the weight of forgotten tools. I moved with soft steps, each creak in the floorboards a betrayal of my presence. I kept the beam low, skimming the edges of the room. Then I saw him. Henry Caldwell was slumped at a workbench against the far wall, head tipped forward like a broken puppet. His shirt was dark at the shoulders, and I could see the glint of sweat on his brow where the light caught it. His hand clutched a knob on a radio tuner. Wires splayed across the table like veins. I knelt beside him, fingertips pressed to his neck. No pulse. His eyes were fixed in the last act of terror. I radioed dispatch with a steady voice, though each word felt borrowed from someone braver. Unit 17 to dispatch. Subject down, 247 Old Mill Road. Send medevac and backup. The crackle of acknowledgement came too distant. I slid gloves from my pocket. My fingers shook as I rolled Caldwell onto his back. The skin on his forearms bore irregular burn marks, small, circular, almost surgical in precision. Whoever did this knew how to bend electricity into a weapon. I stepped back and surveyed the room. The only sound was the alarm's pulse, a heartbeat counting down the hours until dawn. I found Caldwell's notebook open on the workbench. The pages were soaked with coffee stains, the ink running like tears. I read the last entry aloud, voice low. July 8th, third night, same distorted words through every channel. I unplugged it all. It follows me. You should have listened. I feel watched. I'll find the source tonight. My chest tightened. This wasn't some sad, late-night tinkering gone wrong. Caldwell had been scared. Real scared. I scanned the bench again. Every tool was in place except a small coil of copper wire and a handful of metal clamps. I snapped photos with my phone and bagged the notebook. The next morning, I sat at my desk in an empty station house and dug through county archives. The logs mentioned Old Mill Road's history. A dam project in 1973, abandoned after 3 workers vanished during a midnight survey. Their equipment was left intact. The official report blamed a cave-in, but no bodies turned up. Local legend said the men heard voices in the tunnels, calls from someone or something buried alive. By afternoon, I had Caldwell's audio recordings. Most were static, pulsing white noise and distant thunder. But the final files held something else. 3 minutes of clear, whispered speech rising through the hiss. "You shouldn't dig here. You'll be next." No echo, no trace of reverb. Just the voice, cold as midnight water. I loaded up my cruiser at dusk and headed back to the dam site. The sun melted into the horizon as I parked beside the rusted remains of the control shack. A corroded ladder led down through a hatch. I took a deep breath and climbed. The air grew colder, damper, carrying the taste of mud and old stone. My flashlight beam danced across walls slick with moisture. Halfway down, I paused. My radio sputtered with static. I caught a faint melody, like a music box half buried in water, then it cut out. I steadied my grip on the ladder and pressed on. At the bottom, I wiped condensation from my face and looked around. The cavern stretched 60 feet in every direction, the ceiling lost in shadow. To my left, names were carved into the limestone: J. Franklin, M. Alvarez, R. Cheng. Beneath them, fresh chiseling traced the same letters. The grooves were sharp, bleeding into the rock like scars. My pulse hammered in my ears. The beam grazed over concrete and rebar, remnants of the dam's foundation. Half-filled boreholes dotted the floor, like eyes watching. I swept the light across the far wall. There, buried in the rock's folds, I saw a ridge of concrete that didn't belong. I crouched and ran my fingers along it, cool and damp. A seam gave way under pressure. I pushed, and the panel shifted, revealing a cavity just big enough to slip into. I clicked on my headlamp and crawled inside. The space was tight, claustrophobic. Water dripped from above, pooling around my boots. The beam illuminated skeletal outlines embedded in ruined equipment, twisted metal, broken gauges, and shards of plastic. I swallowed, tasting blood at the back of my throat. The shapes resolved into bodies. 3 men pressed into wet concrete, faces frozen in panic. I stumbled back out, breath ragged. The ladder felt slippery under my palms. I climbed, every rung a moment to consider turning back and denying I'd seen anything. At the top, I slammed the hatch and locked it. The night air hit me like a blow. I fumbled for the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 17. I need a team at the dam. Potential human remains. Send CSI and medical examiner." Silence answered. Then, in a calm voice, dispatch replied, "Copy that, Unit 17, ETA 20 minutes. The calm grated on my nerves. I sat in my cruiser, hands wrapped around the wheel. Radio static crackled between calls. My eyes stayed on the dark silhouette of the hatch behind me. Dawn would be hours away. I thought of Caldwell's warning, the promise in his scribbled words. The dam held more than water. It hid secrets that someone had tried to erase with concrete and silence. I should have left then. Packed up and driven away before curiosity dug me deeper. But something held me there. An oath to find the truth, no matter what it cost. The night stretched on, indifferent. Somewhere in the damp earth, voices waited. And I knew they'd heard me. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces pressed into wet concrete. I haunted the edges of consciousness until dawn. By first light, I was back at Caldwell's workshop. The front door was locked now. The bolt slid home with a heavy thunk beyond my ear. I shone my flashlight through grimy panes. Inside, the bench was empty. The radio tuner sat on its mount like a skull on a spike, wires still curled in their original shape. I stepped forward and tested the door. It gave under pressure. I eased inside. The air hung thick, sweet with solder and cold metal. I scanned the walls for CCTV or motion sensors. nothing. Caldwell had stripped the place bare. Only one item remained, a black duffel bag tucked beneath a shelf. I tugged it free and unzipped it. Inside lay notebooks, a handheld recorder, spare coils of copper wire, and a small metal cylinder, perhaps a power regulator. I set my flashlight down and thumbed through the notebooks. Most pages described frequency tests, diagrams of cavity resonance, notes on groundwater flow, and acoustic impedance. He'd sketched the dam's layout, the same ladder shaft. He'd mapped my shifts, my patrol routes, even jotted times I'd radioed dispatch. I paused over those entries. He'd been watching me as closely as the voices did. I took photos of each page and bagged them, my stomach twisting. How long had Caldwell been here? Weeks? He'd barely had time to set up before nightmares drove him to the dam. He'd connected that cylinder to his tuner, I realized, to boost the signal he heard through the ground. Then someone had pulled the plug. The burns on his arms spoke of forced shutdown. I stood in the beam of my flashlight, the metal cylinder balanced in my palm, and felt the weight of eyes on the back of my neck. I spun, expecting a figure, but saw only dust motes dancing in the beam. I left Caldwell's place and drove to the station. Evidence lockers were full, so I stowed the bag in the back of my cruiser and locked it. The cylinder fit in my palm like a heart. Weak batteries and a few simple circuits. Nothing more than a modified ham radio. Yet it had turned Caldwell's life into a nightmare. I dropped the bag with the county lab, requesting a trace analysis. I scheduled interviews for the morning, but sleep would elude me again. Instead, I drove out to Old Mill Road. The pickup Caldwell left sat where I'd abandoned it. Corn rustled like distant applause as I approached. The driver's window was cracked, and the seat was damp from dew. I leaned inside. The notebook lay face down on the passenger seat, soaked through. I grabbed it, but the moment my fingers brushed the pages, the engine ticked in greeting. Like a beast awoken, I yanked back and backed away, nearly tripping over a cornstalk. The radio lay on the floor, screen dark, no lights, no wires. I pictured Caldwell's last moments in this field, sweaty and frantic, convinced the signal had followed him here. I slammed my cruiser door and drove away with the notebook clutched to my chest. Back in my office, I set the book on the desk under white light. The pages were nearly illegible. The ink bled into the paper. I worked under magnification hours, piecing words. They're under the dam. They keep calling my name. They need help. I can't stop. If I don't adjust the tuning coil, they'll never hear me. His handwriting grew spidery at the end, the letters leaning as though they fought to stay upright. The last line read, "Tonight I'll send my voice back." I felt the knot of dread tighten. Caldwell wasn't just a victim. He'd volunteered. He'd chased those voices into a tomb. And now I worried the same impulse lived in me. I glanced at the cylinder on the lab request form. Acoustic waveguide modified. Subject to analysis. If that thing actually worked, it could amplify any sound in underground channels. It could carry my voice straight to those men beneath the dam. Or worse, it could invite them to talk back. I spent the rest of the day assembling gear. Extra batteries, a backup radio, a portable recorder. I loaded everything into my pack and packed food and water. No one would volunteer for another descent into that shaft. I didn't want to tell anyone where I was going. It would invite questions I didn't have answers for. If I came back, maybe I could stop the whispers. If I didn't, at least they'd know I tried. Night fell. My cruiser's headlights swept the gravel road as I parked at the dam. The hatch was closed, sealed with a padlock. I broke it free with bolt cutters. The metal shrieked. I kept my radio on low, volume down to a whisper. Static hissed like a warning. I clicked on my headlamp and climbed down the ladder, heart thundering. My pack thumped against the ladder rungs. At 15 feet, I paused and looked up. A sliver of starlight framed the hatch, an exit I might never use again. At 30 feet, the air cooled to a chill. My breath fogged in the beam. I could hear dripping, slow, deliberate. I reached 15 more feet and stepped off the ladder onto stone. The floor was uneven, soaked in groundwater. Concrete fragments and debris lay strewn about. I should have turned back then, but I had to know. I set my recorder on a tripod and pointed it toward the far wall. I clicked on the cylinder, the regulator powering a small speaker tucked inside my jacket. It was crude, but enough. I keyed the mic, voice steady. "This is Deputy Marcus Hale. Henry Caldwell is dead. 3 men lie beneath this dam. If you can hear me, I want to help. I'm here to pull you out." I waited. Silence pressed in. Static crackled in my ear. Then, so faint I thought it was my own pulse, I heard names. Frank. Lynn. A hiss, like water over pebbles. Morrow. A long pause. "We're trapped." The voice was distant, half-formed, as though the dam itself spoke. My heart froze. I answered. "Franklin? Alvarez? Cheng? I read your names. I know what happened. Help is coming." The static deepened to a roar. My recorder shook. Walls groaned. I shone the light around. Shadows flickered at the edge of vision, shapes that moved with the beam. My hand shook on the cylinder's switch. A low rumble built beneath my boots. Chunks of concrete dislodged and fell. Water gushed from overhead, sluicing down the walls. The ladder exploded in sound above me, metal ripping free. My radio popped with static. The voice came again, louder. "They betrayed us. They buried us alive." The words cut clear. My skin crawled as the chamber vibrated. I scrambled toward the ladder. My boots slipped in the mud. The recorder tumbled off its tripod and skidded away. I grabbed my pack and blasted upward, kicking into the ladder rungs, each pull lifting me farther from the roar behind. Water pounded my back. I burst through the hatch, rolling onto the concrete apron above. Air hit my lungs hard. I looked down. Water surged through the open hatch, churning shadows and foam. I hauled myself up and slammed the hatch closed, punching the lock shut. I pumped the bolt home and collapsed against the metal, gasping. The dam was silent again, starlight gone, buried by the hatch. My recorder lay at my feet, lens cracked, mud caked the base. With trembling fingers I pried it open. The tape had snapped. I didn't wait for dawn. I left without looking back. My cruiser's heater steamed on my arms as I drove. The cylinder buzzed in my pack, pulsating like a hidden heart. The lab analysis still pending, the notebooks yet unread, the voices echoing in my mind. I knew what I heard wasn't wind in the rocks or water through pipes. It was them, those men, and now they had my promise. I parked behind my trailer and sat for hours, radio off, darkness all around. My hands clenched the wheel, the memory of their voices thrumming in my bones. I thought of Caldwell's last words, his scribbled plea, the promise he never saw fulfilled. I thought of my report, the facts I'd write. Unit 17 experienced structural collapse risk. Subject withdrew after auditory contact possible. Further exploration deferred. But I knew the truth wouldn't fit on paper. The voices wouldn't stay silent, not after I spoke back. Not after I offered help. The dam held its secrets tight, but I'd unlocked its door, and now I carried its key. I don't know what happens next. I only know the night waits, patient and still, ready to speak again. I woke to the sound of rain pattering on the roof of my trailer, soft, relentless. like fingers drumming a warning. I sat up and stared at the ceiling, heart still hammering from the dam's rumble. My recorder and cylinder lay on the table, silent now, their secrets locked inside. I reached for my phone. No messages from dispatch, no lab results yet. The lab's note said analysis pending, but I knew better than to trust a cold, printed line. If the voices were real, someone needed to hear them again. Someone with authority to act. That morning, I met Dr. Lydia Pierce at the county lab. She was sharp-eyed, her white coat spotless, hair pulled back into a no-nonsense bun. I handed her the cylinder in an evidence bag and the metal shards from Caldwell's duffel. She examined the parts under fluorescent lights, the hum of instruments around us. I could almost hear my voice echoing from the dam, calling their names. "Acoustic waveguide," she said quietly, tracing a fingertip over the component. "You've modified a basic VLF transducer. It's crude, but it would amplify low-frequency vibrations in stone or concrete." She tapped a screen. "Here, oscilloscope readings from your sample show resonance peaks around 15 to 30 hertz. That's infrasound territory. That kind of frequency can travel hundreds of feet through rock." I nodded, picturing Caldwell hunched over his bench, wires spliced under the ghostly glow of the porch light, determined to stay connected. "Infrasound can induce anxiety, disorientation," she continued. "The ancients used it in sacred chambers. Some claim it evokes a sense of presence, like someone's watching." She looked up. "You heard voices, not vibrations." "I heard names," I said, voice low. She paused. "Did you record it?" I pulled the ripped tape from my pocket. "Sort of." I rested it on the table. The tape snapped, but I swear I heard them. Dr. Pierce slid on gloves and held the tape edges. "I'll try to splice it and stabilize the medium, no promises." She began work under a microscope. I watched as she traced the torn tape ends, then pressed gently. The lab's machines hummed, their lights dancing off her calm face. I held my breath, half afraid I'd hear them again over the lab's speakers. While she worked, I filled her in on the wrecked audio files from Caldwell's workshop, the notebook entries, the dam's secret cavity. She scribbled on a pad. July 14th, Caldwell death. July 16th, tape damage. July 18th, debris retrieval. I spoke in clipped phrases, reluctant to admit how close I'd come to disappearing in that shaft. When she finally tore her eyes from the microscope, I knew she'd found something. "I've managed a partial splice," she said. "Listen." The lab went quiet. I held my breath as she fed the tape into an ancient player. Static hissed, then a low rumble. Underneath, a male voice, faint, distant, spoke a single word. "Marcus." The syllable was drawn out, stretched by the infrasound's resonance. My skin prickled, and I fingered the edge of my holster. The voice came again. "Help!" Then gone, swallowed by static. Dr. Pierce looked at me, eyes wide. "You're sure it said your name?" "It did." My voice trembled. "It knew me." She leaned back. "This isn't just acoustics, there's intent here." She wiped her hands on a paper towel. "I'm recommending you hand this over to the State Bureau. This is beyond our scope." I nodded, but I hesitated. Hand it over and watch someone else dance with the voices, or press on alone, damned by my own curiosity? I slipped the tape back into my pocket. "Not yet," I said. "Not until I know what they want." Dr. Pierce looked at me, sadness in her eyes. "Be careful," she warned. "People who chase, voices in the dark often disappear without a trace." I thanked her and left. Outside, the rain was heavier, drenching everything in a cold sheen. I pulled my hood up and headed back to the trailer. The county fair was set to open in 2 days. The townsfolk would flood Old Mill Road in their cars, oblivious to the dam's history or Caldwell's warnings. Lights, music, laughter, noise to drown out the memory of those men beneath their feet. By afternoon, I was back at the station, sifting through Caldwell's notebooks. Page after page of calculations and schematics. A man obsessed with proving something unnatural beneath the dam. He'd sketched maps of the county, marked locations of old wells and abandoned barns, all connected by subterranean streams and rock fissures. He believed the infrasound carried messages not just audible, but meaningful. One notebook had a list of local names, county commissioners, land developers, even the sheriff's family. Caldwell thought they knew more than they said. As I flipped a page, a folded scrap of yellowed paper fell out. I opened it. An excerpt from a 1973 classified report referring to Project Aurora, a subterranean communication experiment. The report warned of psychological hemorrhage in subjects exposed to uncontrolled infrasound. A footnote: field tests suspended after unplanned subject activation. I felt a chill. Caldwell had uncovered Aurora's secret data, proof that they'd experimented on those dam workers. He must have found this in restricted vaults, then cross-referenced it with local archives. His last entry flickered on the page. Tonight I make contact. If Project Aurora still lives, they will come for me. Caldwell knew they wouldn't let him walk away with that report. I turned out the station lights and drove back toward the dam. I had the cylinder, the tape, and now this report. If I could broadcast that snippet of text through the infrasound device, maybe I could lure them out, get answers. Or maybe it'd be my undoing. The night air was warm and still, every insect and frog amplified by the quiet. I parked in the overgrown lot near the hatch. My headlights carved a path through the weeds. I stepped out and walked to the horse trough turned cistern near the shack, my staging area. I unloaded my gear, recorder, cylinder, batteries, project report. I set the makeshift speaker near the hatch, aimed at the seam in the concrete. A single microphone picked up the chamber's echoes. I keyed the recorder and read aloud from the Project Aurora report. Subjects exposed to uncontrolled infrasound exhibited hallucinatory speech perception. Activation protocols suggest a residual cognitive imprint within geological resonators. I repeated it twice, then paused, heart pounding. I clicked on the cylinder's power. Silence met me. My skin tingled, as though the air itself listened. Then, from deep within the dam, came the first pulse, a low boom, reverberating through the cistern's metal walls. The ground trembled beneath my boots. I shone my light at the hatch. Water seeped through cracks, pooling at my feet. The recorder crackled. A voice, far away, fractured, cut through. They lied to us. The tone was mournful, accusatory. We were prisoners. The words were warped by layers of concrete and earth, but unmistakable. I pressed record. The next phrase came clearer, sharper. Find the others. My pulse spiked. I'm here, I whispered, voice trembling. Tell me what you need. Static roiled, then the final transmission. Bring Marcus. The beam from my flashlight bent at the hatch's seam, and I knew they meant me. Whatever they were, wanted my voice to join theirs underground. A sudden roar built behind me, as though the dam itself exhaled. My hair stood on end. I dropped the cylinder and stumbled back. The hatch shook, bolts straining. I fumbled to unclip the mic, but the roar swallowed everything. The last thing I felt was a tremor under my feet, as if the earth was turning beneath me. Then the noise stopped. The night fell quiet, too quiet, like the moment before a body hits the floor. My ears rang. I clamped my hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. The hatch was sealed once more. I was alone in the dark, drenched and shaking, with recordings that proved the voices were real and had names, and now they wanted me. I turned and ran back to my cruiser, boots slipping in the mud. Every splash of water sounded like footsteps chasing me. The dam lay silent behind me, but I knew it was waiting. As I drove away, I glanced in the mirror. The water near the hatch rippled without wind, as if something beneath reached out. I didn't look back. The road blurred beneath the tires as I sped away from the dam site, heart pounding in sync with the engine's roar. Rain had turned the gravel into slick mud, each spray of road grit a reminder that the ground itself was alive with something I'd never understood. By the time I reached my trailer, thunder rattled the sky. I killed the engine and sat in darkness, breathing hard, trying to unlearn the sound of voices calling my name from below. I unpacked the recorder and the cylinder on the small table inside. The tape I'd captured played on my mind. Bring Marcus. I replayed that moment in my head so many times that my own voice felt alien. I pressed my palms into my eyes, willing sleep to come, but it refused. My mug of cold coffee grew stiff with bitterness. Around midnight I heard it, a low hum, like machinery idling in the basement. I froze. My trailer has no basement. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the wood floor. I grabbed the cylinder and held it aloft, its small infrasound speaker quiet now, but heavy in my hands. The hum shifted pitch, matching the dam's resonance exactly. I felt it in my bones, a trembling that warned me it would not stop. I rushed outside, rain slapping my face. The trailer's electricity flickered, a single light over the door pulsing in time with the hum. I pointed the cylinder at the bulb and clicked the power button. The hum surged into a roar, and the bulb shattered, showering shards at my feet. In the flash of broken glass, I saw it, a shape in the dark, just beyond the porch light's range. When the shards settled, it was gone. My breath came in ragged pulls. I backed away into the trailer and slammed the door. The rain pattered on the roof like fingers drumming a code. I pressed my back against the wall, clutching the cylinder like a talisman. If those men had voices sealed in concrete, maybe they could use this device to find me anywhere I went. I spent the next day in a haze. I filed an incomplete report, nothing about voices or infrasound. Simply, found unauthorized equipment. Retrieval deferred, pending State Bureau review. My captain signed off without comment. He knew more than he said, but the silence weighed less than admitting the truth. That night, restless, I drove to a friend's farm just off County Road 22. I needed a place to stay, somewhere the dam's frequency might fade. My friend, Deputy Sarah Reyes, took one look at my face and swept me inside her house before I could explain. She poured me a glass of whiskey. "You look like hell," she said. I wanted to tell her everything, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded and drank. She left me in her spare bedroom. I lay on the mattress, hands wrapped around the cylinder like a lifeline. The hum came back, faint at first, then stronger. It seeped into the room through the floorboards. I held up the device and clicked it on. The hum matched my fear. I spoke into the recorder. "I'm at Sarah's. I don't know how far this reaches. I don't know what they want beyond my presence." I stopped the recording and shut off the cylinder. The room fell silent, but I still felt the weight of eyes watching me from the dark corners. I tried to sleep, but dreamt of the dam's shaft, water rising, drowning me in stone and memory. I woke, gasping, eyes locked on the ceiling. Something in the night pressed against my eardrums, words I couldn't make out. I stumbled to my feet and found the recorder on the floor. Its play button had been pressed. Static filled the room, then a phrase so soft it might have been in my head. "Thank you." I backed away and turned on the light. The cylinder lay on the nightstand, its speaker grill bent inward. No sign anyone had been here, except that felt like a sign in itself. I gathered the recorder and cylinder and fled into the night, rain streaking my face as I drove back to my trailer. By dawn, exhaustion blunted my senses. I opened the back of my cruiser and found my duffel bag missing. Caldwell's notebooks, my maps, the handful of evidence I'd collected. I slammed the trunk and checked the cabin. The binder with Project Aurora pages was gone. In its place was a single sheet of yellow paper, pinned under my windshield wiper. I yanked it free with gloved fingers. On it, scrawled in neat, looping handwriting, "You listen. Now we listen to you." That afternoon, I reported the missing evidence. I told dispatch I must have misplaced it. My voice was flat. Inside, something inside me died and rose again, angled, waiting. The State Bureau arrived 2 days later and seized my devices. They told me the equipment was classified. They offered to transfer the case but insisted I stay on retainer. I agreed, too tired to argue. Left alone, I sat at my desk in the empty station house. The sunset and shadows crept across the walls. I opened a fresh notebook and wrote, July 22nd, 2013. I hear them now in the wind, in steel pipes and static bursts on my radio. I do not know if they want rescue or revenge. I know I cannot stay silent. I closed the notebook and walked outside. The air was still. The dam lay miles away, unseen but pulsing in my mind. I unzipped my jacket and pressed the cylinder against my chest. It vibrated quietly, like a heartbeat. I felt it sync with mine. In that moment I understood. Their voices were never meant to be buried. They would outlive me, carrying my name through every broken frequency, every trembling wall, every hollow echo. I slipped the cylinder back inside and locked the station door behind me. As I walked to my cruiser, the wind rose, carrying a whisper so faint I almost mistook it for my own breath. "Marcus." I stopped. The road stretched empty before me, fields of corn and shadows. I gripped the door handle and let the whisper fade into the night. Then I climbed in and drove away. I drove until the world blurred into a smear of headlights and rain. By the time I reached the outskirts of Willow Creek, the clock read 2:13. My mind was a tangle of static. Voices burrowed into every thought, every heartbeat. I parked outside the old firehouse, our secondary dispatch point, and stepped inside, boots thudding on the concrete floor. The place was abandoned for a decade, choked with dust and the smell of oil, but the radio gear still hummed softly in the corner. I grabbed a handheld mic and keyed the transmitter. Unit 17 to anyone listening. Marcus Hale. I'm at the firehouse on County Road 7. I have evidence. Audio, documents, equipment. I need someone with authority to hear this. My voice cracked. I waited. The only reply was the endless hiss of an open channel. I set my recorder on the counter beneath a bank of darkened radios. I unpacked the cylinder and slipped the modified waveguide behind a dented metal cabinet, aimed at the wall that backed onto the old engine bay. Next to it, I laid out Caldwell's notebooks, the weathered Project Aurora report, and my own folder of dam site photos. I flicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the shadows. Every surface seemed coated in waiting, dust motes swirling like motes of memory. I pressed record. Entry: July 23rd, 2013. I'm broadcasting on an open frequency to anyone who can help. The dam, Project Aurora, Caldwell's death, these are connected. I've heard the voices clearly. Franklin, Alvarez, Cheng. I have recordings of them calling my name. I have documents showing the Corps covered up their deaths, buried them in concrete. I have a device that can bring their voices to any resonant chamber in these walls. Someone needs to listen, needs to believe. I can't do this alone. I paused and took a breath, listening to my own ragged inhale through the mic. The beam of my flashlight picked out a faded fire engine silhouette painted on the opposite wall. I imagined the voices seeping through, like water bleeding through stone. Suddenly, the radios came to life. Fragments of chatter, then nothing. The static coalesced into a whisper. Marcus. The word carried as if the very building spoke, its concrete foundations humming with infrasound. My fingers tightened on the recorder. "Hello?" I called. The word came again, closer, drawn out. Marcus. The cabinet behind me shuddered. Tools clattered inside as though struck by an unseen hand. I spun, flashlight beam slicing the darkness. In the shadows, I thought I saw them. 3 silhouettes, elongated and blurred, faces indistinct. They hovered behind the cabinet, voices now a chorus. "We were buried. We were forgotten. We need release." My knees buckled. I stepped back, recorder slipping in my grasp. I stumbled over a loose board, smashing the device against the floor. It barked with static, then cleared for one final phrase. "Bring them home." The beam flickered, and the cabinet door burst open. A gust of cold air rushed out, smelling of damp stone and iron. My breath caught. I saw sawings of movement beneath the floor vents, shadows writhing like living smoke. My flashlight sputtered and died, plunging me into darkness. I didn't wait. I fled through the door into the night, heart hammering against my ribs. I slammed the door behind me, locking it, pressing my shoulder against the cold steel as though it could keep me safe. Rain pelted the roof, drowning out the low hum that seemed to emanate from beneath the building. I tore down County Road 7 toward home, adrenaline fueling every mile. But the voices followed, in my rearview mirror, in the static of my radio, in the wind that rattled the trailer windows. When I pulled into my driveway, the porch light was off. I fumbled for my keys, but as my hand closed on the handle, the metal cylinder in my jacket pocket buzzed to life. I froze. The buzzing grew into a low, insistent drone. My breath billowed in front of me as I unzipped the jacket. The cylinder lay there, speaker grill vibrating. Above the hum rose a clear voice, unmistakable and intimate. "Come back." My hand went to my holster reflexively, but I did not draw my weapon. Instead, I stared at the buzzing device, the rain dripping from my eaves. The voice came again, softer. "We're waiting." I have no idea what happened afterward. I know I did not step into the trailer that night. The next morning, neighbors found my cruiser running in the driveway, engine idling, headlights. On the trailer door was ajar, windows dark. Inside, only the cylinder lay on the bed, still humming faintly, and no sign of me anywhere. State investigators ruled my disappearance a voluntary abandonment. They sealed my files and declared the case closed. The cylinder and garbled recordings were locked away, their contents deemed inconclusive. But sometimes, late at night, small-town farmers swear they hear a whisper carried on the wind. A solitary voice calling out across empty fields, "Marcus." And beneath the earth, in the silent tunnels of the old dam, 3 destinies remain entwined, waiting to be heard again.